The rain wasn't just falling. It was attacking my bedroom window, each drop a tiny bullet of cold reality. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the smell of cheap tuna casserole was creeping under my door, a scent that will forever be the aroma of defeat. I was 24, hunched over a second-hand laptop at a wobbly desk, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. Spreadsheets, always spreadsheets. Columns of numbers that represented a life I was desperately trying to build out of thin air. My mother's voice came through the door, not with a knock, but as a statement of fact. Still wasting your time with that. Nonsense. The pause before nonsense was always the worst part. It was a vacuum where hope went to die. She pushed the door open, standing there with a laundry basket balanced on her hip, her eyes scanning my setup with a familiar, weary disappointment. You need a real job, Maya. A career, not this typing. I took a slow breath, the kind you take when you're trying to dissolve a stone of anger in your stomach. It's not typing, Mom. It's a business. She let out a short, dry laugh, the sound of crumpling paper. A business. Selling what? Ideas? You can't put food on the table with ideas. She came closer, her shadow falling over my screen. Mrs. Henderson's son, Mark, you remember him? He's a manager at the logistics firm. They're hiring in the warehouse. It's stable. It's real. Real, that word. It was her favorite weapon. A real job meant a guaranteed, modest paycheck. It meant benefits. It meant you were a cog in a machine that society recognized. What I was doing, building an online course teaching people how to master a complex design software, that was fantasy. It was a house of cards. And in her world, a strong wind always came eventually. Mom, I'm close. I can feel it. Feel what? Bankruptcy? She set the laundry basket down with a soft thud. You're living in your childhood bedroom. You're 24. When are you going to start your life? Her gaze softened then, but not with kindness. With pity. It was a look that said, I feel sorry for you for believing in yourself. She placed a hand on my shoulder. It should have been a comfort. It felt like a weight. Sweetheart, she said, and her voice dropped to a whisper, as if she was sharing a painful, universal truth. You have to be realistic. You're smart, but you're not. A visionary. You'll never be someone. The words didn't land with a bang. They didn't shatter me. They seeped in. A slow, cold poison that spread through my veins. Familiar and freezing. You'll never be someone. It wasn't just a comment on my business. It was a verdict on my soul. It was the culmination of a lifetime of small corrections, of subtle redirections towards a path of mediocrity, of safety. Don't draw attention to yourself. Don't aim too high. Don't be disappointed. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? Arguing would only prove her point, that I was emotional, unstable, not grounded in the real world. I just stared at the spreadsheet, at the number of people on my waiting list, 147. 147 people who believed my nonsense had value. But in that moment, her voice was louder. She left, closing the door behind her, leaving me in the blue glow of my screen. The cursor blinked, a tiny, persistent heartbeat. I looked around the room. The faded poster of a band I no longer listened to, the stack of library books on marketing and UX design, the cheap threadbare carpet. This was the landscape of my realism. And I realized, with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that I could not live here anymore. Her words weren't a death sentence. They were a catalyst. They were the final, definitive proof that I was fighting the wrong battle. The battle wasn't to convince her. The battle was to prove her wrong. Not for her, but for me. The next morning, I went to the local copy shop and printed a single piece of paper. It was a mock check. In the pay to the order of line, I wrote my name. In the amount box, I wrote, in bold black numbers, 20,001. Below that, I wrote, for becoming someone. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But that number felt like a declaration of war. It was audacious. It was impossible. It was mine. I taped it to the wall directly in front of my desk, right above my screen. Every time I looked up, it was there. A $20,000 promise to myself. The next 6 months were a blur of 3 a.m. nights and lukewarm coffee. I stopped trying to explain what I was doing to my family. I stopped seeking their approval. I built my course, module by meticulous module. I filmed the videos with a webcam I'd saved for 3 months to buy. my voice echoing in the silent late-night house. I edited until my eyes burned. I reached out to every one of those 147 people on my waiting list personally. I joined online communities, not to promote, but to help, to answer questions, to become a genuine voice in that space. I lived on rice, beans, and a ferocious, burning need to see that number on my wall become real. There were setbacks. A launch day where my payment processor failed. A nasty comment from a troll that felt like my mother's voice amplified across the internet. Days where I stared at the $20,000 check and felt the acid taste of imposter syndrome in my mouth. Maybe she was right, but I had built a new support system, not of blood, but of belief. There was Chloe, a graphic designer I'd met in a forum, who would hop on a video call with me at midnight her time just to pep talk me through a panic attack. There was David, a retired teacher who was my first beta tester and became my biggest cheerleader, sending me long, detailed emails about how my course was changing his ability to freelance. This was my real now, a network of people who saw my value because I was demonstrating it, not just claiming it. The turning point came 8 months after the conversation. I had finally launched. The course was live. I'd priced it at $297, a number that felt terrifyingly high. For the first week, there was a trickle of sales. 2, then 5, then 10. It was happening, but slowly. Then, a popular industry blogger I'd genuinely admired and had helped with a technical issue months earlier, without ever asking for anything in return, published a review of my course. He called it the missing manual, and incredibly valuable. My inbox exploded. I was refreshing my sales dashboard, my heart hammering against my ribs. The numbers started to climb. 10 sales became 20. 20 became 50. The revenue ticked over $5,000, $8,000, $12,000, and then, on a completely ordinary Thursday afternoon, as the rain once again streaked my window, I hit refresh one more time. The total revenue displayed on the screen was $20,147. I sat there, completely still. The only sound was the hum of my laptop fan and the frantic beating of my own heart. I had done it. I had actually done it. I looked from the screen to the mock check on my wall. The number was no longer a dream. It was data. It was proof. I had taken her sentence of lifelong limitation, and I had replied, not with words, but with a bank transfer. I had replied with $20,000. I didn't scream or cry. The victory was too quiet, too profound for that. It was a deep, tectonic shift inside me, a settling of my very foundation. I simply reached out, my fingers trembling only slightly, and carefully peeled the mock check from the wall. The tape left a faint, sticky residue, a ghost of its presence. I folded it once, then again, and slipped it into my wallet. It was no longer a motivator. It was a relic, a receipt for a battle fought and won in the silent spaces of my own mind. The next part was logistical, a deliberate choreography of my newfound reality. I found a small, sun-drenched studio apartment across town, its windows looking out over a park, not the neighbor's peeling fence. I signed the lease online, transferred the deposit from the account that now held my $20,000, and felt a thrill that was both terrifying and utterly right. I packed my life into a dozen boxes, the entire process taking less than an afternoon. My childhood room, once a cage, was now just a room again. Telling my mother was the final act of the play. I chose a Sunday afternoon. The air in our house was always thick on Sundays, heavy with the smell of roasting meat and unspoken expectations. I found her in the living room, folding towels, the television murmuring some daytime drama. "I'm moving out," I said, my voice calm, clear. It wasn't a request for permission. It was a statement of fact. She stopped, a fluffy white towel suspended in her hands. Her eyes scanned me, looking for the hesitation, the fear. She found none. "Oh, and where is this miracle coming from? Did you finally take Mark's job at the warehouse?" There was a hopeful, almost triumphant gleam in her eye. "No." I reached into my back pocket, not for my wallet, but for a single printed sheet I'd prepared. It was a simple document, just a screenshot from my course dashboard. The total revenue figure, $2,147, was circled in bold red. I held it out to her. She took it, her brow furrowed in confusion. She pulled her reading glasses from her shirt pocket, perched them on her nose, and looked down. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It wasn't heavy with disappointment or tense with argument. It was a void, a vacuum of understanding. I watched her eyes track over the number. Once, twice, 3 times, I saw the moment her brain decoded it. The moment it shifted from an abstract figure to a concrete reality. Her lips parted slightly. The color drained from her face. What is this? She whispered, the paper rattling in her hand. That's my reply, I said, my voice still soft but ironclad. You said I'd never be someone. This is me replying. The look on her face wasn't pride. It wasn't joy. It was something more complex, more raw. It was shock, yes. But beneath it, a dawning, horrifying realization. The realization that the narrative she had built, the world she had insisted was the only real one, had just been shattered by a piece of paper. The foundation of her certainty had crumbled. She had been so sure of my failure that my success felt like a personal betrayal. I don't understand, she stammered, her eyes glued to the number as if it might burn her. How? It doesn't matter how, I said, taking the paper back from her limp fingers. What matters is that it's real. My business is real. My life is my own now. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there amidst the piles of clean, folded laundry, in a reality that had just been permanently altered. There was no dramatic slam of the door. I simply walked out of that house, got into my beat-up but fully paid-off car, and drove towards my new apartment, my new life. The silence in the car was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was a silence filled with my own potential, not her doubt. That was 2 years ago. The studio apartment is now a 2-bedroom with a view of the city skyline. The $20,000 was just the beginning. The course blossomed, leading to consulting offers, speaking engagements, a thriving community of thousands of students. But the money, as it turns out, was never the real prize. The real victory was the quiet dismantling of her voice in my head. It was the day I realized that her pronouncements were not prophecies, but projections of her own fears. Her real world was just a cage she had built for herself, and she was trying to pass me the key, believing she was offering me shelter. The most rebellious act of my life was not building a business. It was choosing to believe in myself when the person who was supposed to be my biggest cheerleader was my most persistent critic. I see her now, occasionally for awkward Sunday lunches that are more truce than celebration. She doesn't understand what I do, not really. She still asks if I've thought about getting a job with a pension, but the bite is gone from her words. The "you'll never be someone" has been retired, replaced by a cautious, bewildered respect. She lives in a world of defined paths and guaranteed outcomes, and I am a creature of the forest, navigating by my own stars. We speak different languages. Sometimes when I'm feeling generous, I feel a pang of sadness for her. She is terrified of the wilderness I call home. She needs the walls, the rules, the certainty. My freedom to her looks like chaos. My success, a fluke. The other day I was cleaning out my wallet and I found it, the folded, faded mock check for $20,000. I unfolded it, the creases deep and white. I smiled. It wasn't a symbol of anger anymore. It was a map. It was the coordinates of the moment I chose myself. I didn't frame it. I didn't throw it away. I took a lighter from the kitchen drawer, went out onto my balcony overlooking the glittering city, and I set it on fire. I held the corner until the flame licked close to my fingers. Then I dropped it into a metal bowl and watched it curl into black ash. I didn't need the reminder anymore. The proof wasn't on a piece of paper. It was in the quiet confidence that greets me every morning when I wake up in a home I built. It's in the ability to look at a challenge and not hear her voice, but to hear my own, steady and sure. The world is full of people who will tell you what you can't do, who you can't be. They will hand you their fears and call it wisdom. They will show you their cages and call them castles. Your only job, your most important sacred duty, is to take that sentence of limitation, whatever it is, whoever it's from, and use it as kindling for your own fire. Let their doubt be the fuel for your resolve. Let their never be the starting pistol for your now. You don't need to argue with them. You don't need to convince them. You just need to build your thing, save your money, learn your skill, and one day, quietly, without fanfare, you hand them the receipt. You reply with your results. You answer with your life, lived audaciously, unapologetically, on your own terms. That is the only reply that ever truly matters. That is the only sound that can finally, forever, silence the noise.